From long-forgotten spirits to strangers with ill intent, you never quite know what you'll find when you explore abandoned places. Have you ever had any strange, scary, or interesting experiences while exploring abandoned places? If so, I'd love to hear about it. Please write them in the comments below. And if you're new here and you enjoy my video, it would mean a lot to me if you chose to subscribe. I hope you enjoy. Abandoned hospital doesn't like visitors. Hi creepy Reddit. I have a story from about 2 years ago that really captivates me to this day. When I've told this story to close friends, they tell me it's straight out of a movie. I really can't disagree with that. It starts when I finished my first year of college in the Bay Area. I worked my ass off in school and just wanted to have a wild summer, and I would do anything I could to get out of the house. My cousin is my best friend, and we basically did anything and everything together. When there wasn't anything to do, we'd take walks together around my rural neighborhood. I always lived near this old hospital, which used to operate as the biggest trauma unit in my area. Sometime when I was in high school, they shut the hospital down due to unknown reasons. It basically just sat there rotting for a few years before we found it. One day my cousin and I were drinking a cold one, taking one of our routine walks, and ventured away from our usual route through this peaceful random field. We stumbled across this huge parking lot after making it out of the field, but it didn't hit me that this was the old hospital's parking lot we found. We made our way through the lot until we saw this massively grand building standing outside of the lot. The deteriorated banner said emergency room, and this is when we knew we struck gold and stumbled across the back route to this abandoned hospital. We knew of this place, but we had never been here. We hadn't heard any weird outlandish urban legends, nor had anyone we knew been here before us. We pushed forward and checked the perimeter. To our surprise, the first door we walked up to had a rock jammed in between the door frames so we could waltz in. This is when we realized this could potentially be a bad idea if we got caught, and we could suffer some consequences. We agreed we would be quiet and respectful and make it a quick trip. This is where things take a turn, or a few turns. We entered the building and it was the most deafening quiet I have ever heard. The sound of the door closing behind us sounded like a literal bombing. Once the echo stopped from the door, it dawned on us that this place was fucking creepy. We walked slowly, but the floor is covered in glass, which makes even the smallest steps sound like Bigfoot lumbering around a library. We find a patient room, which still has a bed inside. We stop at the doorway to look inside because the floor looks sketchy. Out of nowhere, from around the corner, we hear the faintest, slow, drawn-out whistling. I've never in my life stopped what I was doing so suddenly. I just stare wide-eyed at my cousin, because even a whisper sounds like yelling in this place. We both have our feet planted to the ground, because if we move those two, we will make ourselves known. At this point, we both assumed there could potentially be a squatter or guard of some sort. My cousin hand gestures to me that we have to leave, And we can't just stand here because the whistling was obviously not going to stop at that point. We turned towards the opposite side of the corner that the whistling is at, and we are tiptoeing out to a perfect science. Then the whistling stops. We freeze. Then we hear the glass crunching from around the corner. We start running. Once we get to the door we came from, we realize we didn't put a rock in the door frame when we came in, and the door is completely stuck. As we are trying to get this door open, the glass crunching is now running. We hear the glass crunching until it sounds like it's dangerously close. I'm fucking horrified. We turn around to try another door, and the noise of the glass is literally right in front of us. Yet, no one is there. No one. We book it to a door that says pharmacy and peel open the door. The pharmacy is completely empty except a single, perfectly placed and aligned landline phone plugged into the wall. The phone is off the hook and is making a dial tone. The whole thing was perfectly fucking lined up and centered with the whole room. I've never seen anything like it. The dial tone was so loud in such an empty place. There wasn't power throughout the hospital, so how was it working? I was in shock. We left and never went back. I had heard of some other kids going there at night. They told me they heard whistling and thought someone was lurking in the shadows the whole time. It's a freaky fucking world out there. My terrifying encounter while exploring an abandoned asylum. Everything started with me and a couple of my buddies hanging out at my place. For the sake of this story, I will name my two friends Michael and Lucas. Basically, everyone got pretty much wasted from drinking too much cheap bourbon Michael has brought with him. It was around 2 a.m. when Lucas, still a bit drunk, suggested we should go and explore the abandoned insane asylum. For the context, we all live together in the same small town. There is not much going on there, but when you drive about 15 miles on empty back roads, you should come across the old mental hospital, which has been vegetating ever since it was abandoned in the 1960s, due to unknown reasons. Back to the story. So, since there was really nothing better to do, we all agreed to the 30-minute drive. We grabbed our backpacks, some water, 3 flashlights, and a big hunting knife for protection. Lucas also brought a couple of graffiti cans for obvious reasons. Yeah, he was into that stuff at the time. The drive was relatively unspectacular, with the exception that Michael almost ran over a rattlesnake laying in the middle of the road. When we arrived, the sight of this huge asylum just standing there for all these years made me feel a little uneasy. But my doubts quickly evaporated as Michael and Lucas were already going around the place, looking for an entrance. We finally found a window that was not completely boarded up with beams, and then crawled headfirst through the small opening. I quickly got on my feet and let my eyes get adjusted to the darkness that completely surrounded us. We powered up our flashlights and began wandering through the corridors with rooms on either sides. The walls were pretty much all covered in graffiti, so Lucas suggested that we should look out for a basement entrance, with the intention of finding a free spot for his graffiti. After a 30-minute search, we finally found the basement entrance. The stairs were rusty and creaked with every step. The whole basement smelled terrible. Lucas quickly disappeared down a long hallway with rooms on either side, Michael and I keeping pace up behind him. As we wandered off further into the dark hallway, which are cheap flashlights only poorly lit up, the terrible smell even grew worse. I can only describe it as a mixture of vomit and rotten eggs. What struck me as odd was that the walls were pretty much clean, unlike the site we made at the first floor. It almost seemed like nobody has ever made it all the way to explore the basement level. Everything was going relatively smooth up until the point when Lucas started making much noise by shaking his graffiti cans in order to prepare them for his act of vandalism. So he started spray painting one of the nearby walls. Michael and I just watching him do his thing. When he finally finished his piece, the smell of aerosol in the air almost drowned out the horrible stink that was still in the air. As we made our way down the hallway, I could tell that the smell came from a small room further down to the left of us. At this point, we were all pretty much freaking out. What would we find in that room? I had the hunting knife tight in my hands as I approached the room and shined my flashlight inside. The light beam hit, and I kid you not, a circle of burned out candles. In the center of the candles was a dark object hanging from the ceiling. At this point, I had to vomit because of the smell coming from this room. Michael was the bravest one of us, as he stumbled into the room, grabbing a metal bar from the pile of junk next to him, poking the object with it. As right then we realized the huge amount of dark brownish stains on the floor under that thing. We all quickly sobered up due to the situation as we heard several voices and fast approaching footsteps from across the other hallway. I never ran that fast in my entire life. It's really amazing what adrenaline can do. We finally reached the set of stairs and sprinted through the floor. As we finally reached the window we had entered from, Michael also vomited onto the floor. Lucas then realized that he had left his backpack full of his stuff in the basement, as he had not enough time to pick it up. We sprinted out front and got into my car and hightailed it out of there. As much I know, we only have suggestions of what we saw in that basement. Maybe there was some kind of satanic ritual taking place there, or we just stumbled across a murder scene. I haven't told anybody this story. In fact, Lucas told me that he had not had a good night of sleep since that day, knowing he left his wallet in his backpack there, keeping all his personal information, including his home address. I used to explore foreclosed, abandoned houses when I was in high school. Ran into something angry in one house. Hi, so this story takes place around the time of the housing crisis, back in 2008 or so. I was in high school at the time. A buddy, I'll call Eric, and myself would do some urban exploring by sneaking into empty, abandoned, foreclosed homes. Of course, we'd do these explorations in the dead of night to avoid any trouble with the law. I can't give away the location because people now live there, and I have no scientific rational explanation for what happened. But I know what I saw and heard, so I'd like to share it with you all. So we set out around 12 AM, just like we would any night. About an hour or so in, we find a house that I often saw on my walks to school. As we walk up to the house, we scan for anyone. Then we make our way down the large driveway that leads into the backyard of the house. The first thing I noticed is how tall the grass was, like it hadn't been mowed in quite some time, months I'd say. Then I notice a smaller house near the back of the property. We told ourselves we'd check that house out once we've explored the bigger one. We enter the bigger house from the door that leads into the garage, and from the garage, we stepped into the kitchen. Believe it or not, the doors were unlocked. When we enter the kitchen, we see the house was almost pitch black. We can only see a few feet ahead, thanks to the streetlights. So I use my only light source at the time, a cheap flip phone with the screen brightness on max. We start our exploration down the hallway and check out each room, 5 in total, counting the 2 living rooms. Eric is close behind me as we make our way through each room and eventually back to the kitchen. Once in the kitchen, we chat about how nice the house is and its size given the area it's in, much bigger than the surrounding houses. As we're talking, I notice a metal decoration hanging above the kitchen doorway. It almost looked like some sort of decorative shield. I pull it from its spot and inspect it closely. Once done, I can't figure out how to put it back, so I set it between my feet on the tile floor. I take a look at my friend and take a step into the kitchen. Then we both hear what sounds like something sliding along the floor, and then a bang at the end of the hall. Eric and I both freeze and stare at one another through the streetlight shining through the kitchen window. Eric whispers to me, "Is there someone here with us? Did someone follow us in?" I honestly didn't know, but after a minute or two, we decide to walk down the hall and see what the noise was. As my phone light creeps the end of the wall, we see the shield I had just pulled down. We were both relieved, and I thought, well, maybe I kicked it when I stepped and didn't notice. I picked it up, and this time I figure out how it needs to be attached to its original position. Once again, I look at Eric and take a step towards him, and hear a few clangs on the floor and that familiar sliding sound across the floor and the bang against the wall. Now, we're really scared and frozen, not moving for what seemed like forever. Then an even louder bang is heard at the other end of the house, and we both jump and stare into the dark hallway. Then again, bang, and then quiet, then 3 rapid bangs. Someone was thrashing around in the very last room in the house, and we didn't know what the fuck to do. Determined not to let this person scare us, we run towards the last room and confront this asshole. When we get there, nothing. No one. The room was empty, but how? Who? We were sure it was coming from this room. There's no way whoever it was slipped by us. The room had a sliding glass door leading into the backyard, but it was locked from the inside. Then, before we can gather our thoughts and ask each other what was happening, bang, bang, bang. This time from the kitchen. Scared out of my fucking mind, we both agree it's time to leave. We make our way through the back door in the room and finally to the street, all while checking over our shoulders to ensure no one was going to come running out of the house after us. No one came, and the neighborhood was quiet. Eric and I started to walk home, talking about the house, when Eric notices his pocket knife is missing. He then turns his pockets inside out to show me he isn't joking. We stop, and he keeps telling me we have to go back for it since it's his favorite one. Frustrated, I ask him, "How did you lose it if it's your favorite knife?" He assures me he never removed it from his pocket and has no idea how it could have been removed from his pocket. I agree to go with him and find it. We make it halfway up the street when Eric tells me his back feels like it's on fire. I can see it really bothering him because the expression of pain on his face. He asks me to lift his shirt and look at what could be causing the burning sensation. I lift his shirt and quickly notice 3 very large scratches starting from his right shoulder blade, going all the way down to his left hip, then from his left hip across to his right hip. I tell him this and he immediately says the house is haunted, but he still wants to get the knife. I'm scared, but I'm not going to let him go alone. So we make our way back into the house, and we immediately hear that banging noise. But we made a pact with each other that we would not run, no matter what happened. We begin our search for the knife, looking high and low, all while hearing banging, and now things are being thrown across the room. Of course, I'm fucking scared shitless, and I want to leave. But we haven't found the knife yet. We do one pass through the entire house and end up in the kitchen. In the kitchen, there is an entrance to the second living room that you can see from the backyard. In that room, there is one piece of furniture, a hutch. Now, we had already checked this room, since it's near our point of entrance, and found nothing. But we decide one more pass through the room would not hurt. I make my way into the dark room and let my light lead me to the hutch, and there it is. On the hutch, we found the knife. But for fucking sure, we checked this room and the hutch. He didn't hesitate for a moment. He grabbed the knife and we hightailed it out through the garage and back onto the street. This is far from the end of the story, but to summarize, this house is messed up. The rest of the story includes shadow figures leaping from the bushes, dozens of light bulbs shattering at once, and a knife jammed deep into the front door of the home. Thanks for reading. Update 1. We make our way to our homes, but the entire week we would talk about the house and what was going on in there. We brushed it off and didn't believe it. There had to be some explanation, so we go back. But we bring 3 friends with us because they wanted to see this haunted house Eric and I wouldn't shut up about. While walking through the backyard, I can't explain it, but for some reason, I wanted to get a closer look at the back house. I start making my way towards the house, but I start to feel scared. A feeling of dread that came out of nowhere. I turn away from the house and start my way back to the group, but at the corner of my eye, I saw something leap from the bushes. Some dark figure leaped from the bushes and into the tall grass. But when I gave it my full attention, it was gone. I stared at the bushes for a moment, a little confused, but I brushed it off. I did mention it to the group when I caught up with them, but it was quickly dismissed. We went through the garage door. This time we noticed a white bookshelf full of light bulbs in the garage. The bookshelf was probably around 5 feet high and 3 feet wide, and completely filled with packaged light bulbs. We study it for a moment, and make our way into the kitchen, with Eric leading and me in the back. I enter last and shut the kitchen/garage door behind me. As soon as I release the doorknob, we hear what sounded like someone in the garage breaking all the light bulbs on the bookshelf. Stunned, I remember my heart beating a mile a minute, waiting for whatever the fuck it was to start trying to fight its way into the kitchen. But nothing came, and Eric finally said, "Fuck, I guess we're not going back now." We make our way to the very last room in the house, the same room Eric and I had exited through the last time we were there. Whatever it was did not disappoint. Random objects were being thrown against the wall in front of us. We could hear loud banging all throughout the dark house, like there were people fighting in the damn house. One of the friends decides he's had enough and opens a glass door to the backyard, and 4 of us start making our way through the backyard. I turn around to wait for Eric. He was not moving, caught in a daze, standing in front of an unhinged door that was propped against the wall for support. Eric was staring down the hallway, as if waiting for something. I had to call his name 3 times before he realized we were leaving. He stepped forward, and before my eyes, it looked as though someone tried to throw the unhinged door on top of him. Eric jumped out of the way and started towards me, scared out of his wits. The other 3 are already almost to the street, so we both just keep pace and catch up with them. As soon as we reached the street, one of the friends kept telling us how fucked up that house was. You can see the look of terror on his face as he expressed his feelings about the place. He then mentions a burning feeling going up his calf. Sure enough, he's got those fucking scratches starting from his ankle and stopping midway through his calf. Just before we split up and go home, the 3 of them swear off that place. And that was the last time those 3 friends spoke to us. So, there's more to come. Unfortunately, I'm on a time constraint, but we'll definitely be telling more of what happened. Again, thanks for reading. Update, final. We ended up going to the house a few times after that, but nothing absolutely memorable happened. We heard the knocks and the bangs and whatnot. It wasn't until we took Eric's older brother that it got crazy. I'll call him Derek for clarity and privacy. By this time, we've visited the house a few times and became numb to the banging and throwing. We found it more amusing than anything, like, check this place out, it's haunted. This time, it got more aggressive. After touring the house and seeing Derek freak out, we decided to have a chat in the kitchen. I was standing in front of the window, leaning against the windowsill. Eric was to my right, leaning against the wall, and Derek was standing across from me in front of the doorway that leads to the second living room I mentioned earlier. We talk about how scary the house is and all that. Derek turned around to check out the living room behind him. I mentioned to him that that's the hutch we found Eric's knife on after running around the whole house searching for it. As he turns to face me, Derek fell into the room almost like something pushed or dragged him from behind. I remember looking at his face and seeing a look of terror as he tried to grab on for dear life to the doorway, but the push/pull was too strong and he fell on his ass into the room, but immediately jumped up and ran over to me. He grabbed me by my shirt and started screaming at me, "Yo, what the fuck is your problem? Why did you push me?" I just kept telling him that I didn't push him, and Eric jumped between us and confirmed what I was saying. "He didn't push you, you fell in." Derek explains that someone or something pushed him in. After that, he obviously wanted to leave. So we all agreed, but before we leave, Eric and I both told Derek to check his pockets to see if anything was missing. Of course, his pocket knife is missing, but it's okay. We found the last one, we'll find this one, right? Search the whole house? Nothing, as expected. Now it's time to check the hutch. First pass, nothing. Second pass, nothing. Third, Nothing. Okay, now this knife is really fucking gone. Derek wants one more pass through the house, we agree. We make it to the far room with no luck. We started making our way back to the kitchen with me leading. As I'm coming up to the kitchen, my cell phone light starts to reflect off something shining in front of the door that led into the front yard. It was the knife, jammed deep into the door. There was no way that the knife could have been jammed into the door without any one of us hearing it. Derek takes his knife and we leave. I never went back after that. Out of all the bullshit that went down in that house, that was the not welcome sign I took seriously. And that's it. That's everything I can remember. Eric moved not long after that, and I moved away at the end of 2009. Haven't seen the house since, except when I tell the story to friends, I'll pull up the house on Google Images. I visit Eric from time to time and we always talk about what happened there. Thanks again for being open and understanding. And that was 3 true scary stories from abandoned places. I used to go urban exploring quite a bit myself, and I have a few stories of my own. Nothing as impressive as the stories I told you tonight. Maybe I'll include them in a future urban exploration video. Once again, if you enjoyed tonight's video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any stories, please send them to scarepapa@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening. Stay safe.